What's up, guys? Welcome to the BigTime Strength Podcast. We have a crew chat here today. It's been a minute since we've done a crew chat. We finally got everybody settled in after holidays and getting the new school year going. Amanda had the BigTime Strength Clinic up in Minnesota that she's recovering from. Is going to talk about today. And it's been a busy time, and we're back, and we're excited to kind of get our real wheels going again and getting this thing going. Really thankful. This is podcast number 146, which is almost, I guess, 3 years worth of podcast, which is pretty cool. Today, we're going to have some cool questions. We're going to talk about the clinic that Amanda put on. Miles is going through TeamBuildr right now, getting that ramped up at Luther. We're going to talk about just all the KPIs and stuff and things you kind of go through when you can start collecting data. And speaking of TeamBuildr, we'll start with our OG sponsor, TeamBuildr. They are the leading software for high schools and colleges by providing coaches the ability to write programs online, generate reports, and train athletes remotely. If you sign up with code BigTime, you will receive a free APRE programming template, which works automatically within TeamBuildr. Automate your programming without outsourcing your programming with TeamBuildr. TeamBuildr is they keep evolving, keep adding awesome features, and I use it for my private sector business now. It's awesome, where people love it, and like they said in their read there, they are the leading software for high schools and colleges and doing an awesome job. Reach out to Hewitt. His contact information is in the show notes. They will get you set up and get you automating your stuff so you can actually coach and not worry about your spreadsheets. All right, going on to our second sponsor. They are Powerlift, and they are the leading manufacturer. We have the leading software and the leading manufacturer in the strength conditioning industry on our podcast. Yeah, Preston with the fist bump. All right, so they are the leading manufacturer and distributor of heavy-duty strength training equipment for collegiate and high school athletic performance centers around the world. They bring over 20 years of experience to the strength conditioning sector, and they are manufactured in their state-of-the-art facility in Jefferson, Iowa, a Midwest company. We're a bunch of Midwest people on this podcast, which is really cool. Preston, how close is Jefferson, Iowa to Mount Vernon?
Great question. We're on the same highway, so Highway 30, right down the road. So
All right.
it's actually a couple hours, but still right down the road.
They are proud to support all the coaches making the big time where they're at, and we are super pumped to have Powerlift, such a staple in our industry, supporting our show. Mike Richardson is our show contact. You can reach out to him for all your equipment needs. He will get you hooked up to the rep in your area if you're not from the Midwest, and see what you need and get you helped out. So, all right, moving on from our sponsors. Once again, thank you to those guys. Let's get to our crew chat. We got Coach Miles Clifton, Amanda Berg, and Preston Peterson on the show today. And I'm going to kick it over to Amanda. She's going to talk about her clinic, what's been going on in her world, and get this thing going. Amanda, what you got?
All right, welcome. So we were able to do it. I didn't think we would if you would have asked me 2 days before the clinic, but we did have a big time strength and football clinic in our home state of Minnesota and at my district. And it was a good time. I think if you would ask the coaches, they were very surprised, which I've never really been to a football clinic. This was, my first experience with that besides our clinic that we had. And they were really surprised because most of the football clinics are so big and so many coaches try and hide a lot of what they have going on. So this just kind of like mingling and sharing concept was very eye-opening and very welcoming. That was one of the biggest comments that we had. Miles was able to join us, and he did a great job. He repped Power Lift right away, so that was really good. We were able to highlight we have a commercial that our school made for TeamBuildr with our students, so that was a lot of fun to be able to show that for the first time at this clinic. And great speakers. Like, the speakers were just genuine, authentic. and so much was learned. So I'm grateful to Preston for the bones of the conference. I mean, he did a great job in Mount Vernon, and it was really easy to put that concept and bring it to Minnesota, and it was pretty welcomed. So Miles, what was your experience in it? You did some speaking, you helped host it.
Yeah, it was really good. Like I said, it was a little nerve-wracking there with the kind of resurgence of some COVID stuff. We weren't 100% sure, if we were going to be able to get people there or what the setup was going to look like, if we were going to get to have it at all. But the coaches that were there were very engaged. And like you said, I don't know what the total number of people that ended up being there was, but it was a nice sized group where it could be very conversational. People weren't afraid to ask questions. They weren't just sitting there listening to, somebody speak with 300 people in the room. Like, you had a lot of people that were engaging with the presentations and asking good questions. And I know for me, I haven't done a ton of speaking, but when I do, I like to actually interact with people and not just sit up there and kind of preach at people. So I thought that was really good. Like I said, it was a great day to get together with coaches and just talk shop.
Yeah. And I think I have two favorite highlights I'll talk about with my question, but one of my favorite highlights is at lunchtime, we did a roundtable with our athletes and with our football team. And 4 of our football players came and talked, and our football team was state champions this year. So had, a dream season. We were runners up 2 years ago. So they were really on a vengeance to be state champions. And we were, and we students that talked, I couldn't believe like the insight that they gave. And it just reminded me how much we have to just keep asking our athletes. We always think we know what's best, and just hearing from the athletes and hearing them talk was one of my favorite parts of the day. And then the other favorite part of the day that I'll kind of lead into my question is we had our keynote speaker was unable to come. I was like, oh my goodness. And we have a brand new superintendent at our school. So I don't know him very well. And I've seen him speak a couple times just to our staff, and he does a really good job telling stories. And so asked him the night before if he would be our keynote speaker, and he agreed to it. And he's like, I don't know anything about football. He's actually a gymnastics coach by trade, but the keynote address that he gave it united the group right away and got us set for the day. So one of the concepts that he talked about, and I'm going to lead this into our first question. I know I made this mistake when I was a young coach, is he talked about being a gymnastics coach. And when he started out, he would tell the girls to do pull-ups. You need to do pull-ups. Well, if you've had female athletes before, how many pull-ups can they usually do? 0, right? 0. And he talked about the concept of how do we make it about fatigue, not failure, and just getting the mindset of we're going to do, it's kind of, he talked about everybody's going to do 10 pull-ups every day. We're going to find a way for you to do 10 pull-ups every day. And so then they started figuring it out, helping each other, grabbing each other's feet, and figuring out how you're going to do 10 pull-ups a day. And so it made me really think about coaches. I know when I see new coaches now, the first thing they want to do is just big circuits with kids and just wear them out. When did you make the transition, or maybe you haven't yet, of fatigue, not failure for training your athletes?
I'll start with that. I think it's a cool topic. I actually saw a quote from Twitter, or a post on Twitter the other day I think is relevant. It said, if you go to war every day with your athletes, they'll die.
Yeah.
And which is the same thing, trying to put your kids through war every day. At some point, the goal is not to go to war. It's too dangerous, So I'll remember when I at Jewel, when we talk through that, I automatically think about, the football off season. So what's the traditional concept of the football off season? It's hell week, right? It's see how, and you're out there in cold weather in January and February. It's the mental toughness, and you see how hard they can work and all these things, which I think there's value to an extent on some of those things. But, my first two probably winters there, I had that approach. I'll never forget. We just created a bunch of, we had the sleds and these agility drills and all these things and stations, kind of the mat drill type concept. And it was just about getting the kids tired. Like I'll remember meeting with the coaches and like during the session, like we did 3 rounds and I told them, we're going to do one more round. Why? I don't, just because I want to do one more round. And that was where I was at that point in my career. It wasn't that long ago. Then the 2 winters after that, I started to take probably a different approach, a lot of quality over quantity, looking at speed and kind of that whole don't let today ruin tomorrow type concept of backing it off a little bit. And I had support with that. And what was frustrating, but then at the collegiate level too, and at all levels, I assume, when you have turnover in staff and stuff like that, at some point it's really hard to battle that tradition of years and years and years of these kids have to be buried into the ground. This is the time to be doing that. We ran into that again. So it was like this kind of teeter-totter of always trying to balance that. You got to make the kids tired because that's the culture of / fatigue, not failure. You know what I mean? So that was a challenge, and it still is a challenge. I think you guys probably all battle with that too in some way, with whether it's with a sport coach or with kids themselves now. So like, I'm in the private sector, I guess, and now is what you call it. It's still, you kind of battle this thought of if you're not crawling out the door puking, you wasted your time. It wasn't a good workout or whatever. So I don't know if I really answered this question very well or not. I'm kind of on my rant mode as I usually am. But I think it's a challenge as a coach. And I think about this concept a lot of, I don't know if we'll get too much in this question today for the sake of time, but this concept of like, how complicated or how advanced do we really need to be? I mean, to do what we're supposed to be doing as strength coaches, it goes back to, what's our purpose? And, if you look at probably most people's objectives as a department, as a coach, it's probably in some way verbalized as reduce the likelihood of injury, make them better athletes, and make them better kids, or, make an impact, improve character in some way. So when it comes to like training, and it depends on your population, obviously, but I don't know, I just see like a lot. I don't think it needs to be that complicated or advanced in strength conditioning, especially at the lower levels. Like I think, and it kind of comes to this point of like, our programming and the things we're doing our athletes, is it because it's what's best for the kid, or is it because like, as a coach, look at this super cool program that I run and like all these exercise progressions I have and all this complicated programming that I have, is it because that's what's best for the kids and that's what will accomplish our objectives as a department the best? Or is it because from the ego of the coach themselves, like, look at this program I'm running? I don't know. I just think about that a lot. This kind of gone off the topic of your question, Amanda. So I'm going to wrap my little section up here. If you have thoughts on that itself too, but someone else take Amanda's question. I think Miles, go for it.
Yeah. So for me, this fatigue versus failure, or, you see a lot of people talk about like minimum effective dose, like that concept. For me, I started kind of making that shift probably in my first like 6 months, first 3 to 6 months, whenever I got to Luther. Whenever I came in, my thought process with strength conditioning was always like, how much can I get away with without breaking the athletes down, instead of what can I do Like, what's the least I can do to get a response or like get an adaptation? And I think that mindset probably came from like a lot of the resources that you read on, training websites, especially if you're on like an elite FTS or something like that. Like, those are strength-based sport pages that you're reading, and their entire goal is to push forward their strength or push forward the barbell sports. And you forget about all the other things that athletes have to deal with besides just training. And so my first off season that I had with Luther football was February of 2019, starting in February 2019. And I was kind of approaching it from that end of like, how much can I make these guys do without them like getting run into the ground? And everything that I was doing, I didn't think I was really pushing the envelope that much, just looking at my programming, but I was having kids break down left and right. Like, anytime we try to do speed work or anything like that, like, we had so many hamstrings, especially once we got into like our spring ball. And I felt like I was really pulling it back. But once I kind of stepped back and looked at it a little bit, I realized that I was looking at only what they were doing in the weight room with me, and not like all the other stressors and demands that they had outside of the weight room. And we were doing a lot more speed work at Luther than I was probably used to us doing at Jewel. Like I said, that was kind of around that time that we were starting to make that transition from, the mat drills and just wearing guys out, and kind of starting to work into the speed side of things. And I wasn't super comfortable coaching that stuff yet. The stuff I was comfortable with was the weight room. So I skewed my programming probably too heavily to that. And I wasn't really factoring in the speed work. I wasn't really factoring in, the practices that they were going to for spring ball. And like I said, we just had a lot of guys starting to wear down, break down. And I was kind of scratching my head trying to figure out what was going on. And I realized pretty quick that I was just trying to do too much with them. And so I started to pare stuff back quite a bit. And then, especially once we got into COVID, like, just out of necessity, like, I had less time to train kids. And so we had to be more efficient with our time. And so I was cutting more fluff out of my workouts then. And I was realizing that we were getting similar, if not better, results out of our kids by doing less with them. And so my mindset really shifted in that, it started 3 years ago, but over the course of the last 18 months to 2 years too, it's continued to, like, I find myself all the time continuing to be like, okay, what else can I pull out of my program? Like, I'm trying to pare it down to the simplest form possible. And that kind of goes back to what you're saying. Like, I don't think it really needs to be that complicated. Like, a lot of the accessory stuff that I might've been doing was probably just fluff and filling time and not really giving us an adaptation. So, like, why the heck am I doing it? Like, let's focus on the 5 or 6 things that are really big and really important, and let's do just enough of them to get a response from the kids, and then let's send them on their way and not have them crushed and run into the ground. And I think it makes our athletes happier. I think it gives us better results. So yeah, that's kind of been my process and my journey through that here in the last few years. And like I said, all the time, continuing to try to simplify it even more. Like, that's kind of my overarching goal for our program all the time now, is like, how simple can I make it and still get results from these guys? I don't know, Preston, your thoughts here?
I'm a product of the situation that I'm in. And I'm not saying like I was smart all the way through. It was just the circumstances that we had forced me into the fatigue, not failure mindset from the very beginning. And I'm not trying to say that's because I was really smart. It was literally because we didn't have much time. So we're only going to fill it with the things that were what we call the best. Like, there's no fluff, there was no nothing, because we have such a limited amount of time to train. So what that really allowed us to do was like, look at, so I would send screenshots to Gage and Miles and Joe Quinlan and Jake Niederman right when I was getting the job, like back in the day. And the things I was always asking is, okay, what would you do if you only had this much time? And it was always pushing me that way. And the other thing that's super unique to high school, but maybe even just a small high school, we're a 3A in the state of Iowa, is we have so many multi-sport athletes. So when people talk about early off season, preseason, all this type of stuff, like that's not a thing at Mount Vernon. What it is like we have our training sessions and we go from our fall sports, so football, volleyball, or cross country right into our winter sports. And then from there to spring sports. And almost everybody, if you do one sport, at least you're doing multiple sports. And it's just the culture that we have, and I love it. But what that forces you to do is like always be taking a look at volume, always taking a look at what is the best way for us to be the most effective in our dosing. So just finding ways to be creative with that. And just for coaches that are listening, like some of the ways that you can think about it, like solution based, to make sure that you're focusing on fatiguing, so that we can get a response, or a stimulus, so that we can get a response instead of failure, is to kind of like what Miles was saying, was really narrow down the things that you think are important in your program. And you can justify those up and down no matter what, if they're in season or out of season. If it's that much of a bedrock, that's where I would start. And then start to look at like, what are the most athletic movements someone can do? And some people would say like squat, hinge, that type of stuff. And that's different. So athletic movements would be sprinting, jumping, and throwing. There's nothing more athletic than those things. And then from there, like if after you establish your baseline for those things, then you start to add in, okay, what are the other things that we can do that will help improve those? And that's where I think the weight room movements of squatting, hinging, lunging, all of those things can start to play in. But I think it's super, super important to always have this like prioritizing mindset so that you can justify it, obviously when you're writing the program, but also to your athletes, because that's where you start to get buy-in, be like, okay, this is why we do what we do. So I'm not saying that I knew, but I happened into it, because when I was at Northwest, I did not, my circumstance was different there. So I was not programming the smartest yet. So hopefully that answers a little bit of what you're talking about, Amanda.
Yeah. And, just hearing you, excuse me, talk about that makes me realize the value so much of what you receive by, being under Joe Quinlan and learning from a reputable strength coach, and how much that usually does not happen. I came in, we do what our coaches do. So you got to go through the process where you knew about those mistakes from other coaches. And now as coaches, we need to be educating. I know my biggest hurdle right now with fatigue, not failure, is not me. It's the sport coaches, right? Hearing about the volleyball team running the mile the first week and finding a way to educate our sport coaches of how much our kids are not recovered. And so that's our role now. Obviously so many coaches have made the mistake with fatigue failing instead of fatigue. So just hearing you say that just makes me want to find a way to educate, get it down on paper, showing what we need to do. And unless it's an off-season athlete, never as a high school strength coach right now am I going to do anything related to conditioning.
Yeah, I get that. We do not condition, and we leave most of that. We'll do some going into fall sport, winter sport, spring sport, and summer sport. We'll do a 6 week prior speed and agility sessions to help ramp them up. And there's a little bit of conditioning component to it, but it's really just trying to make sure that they're somewhat prepared. And then most of our coaches are dang smart, and our coaches have been on staff for minus 2 coaches. Every one of our coaches has been on staff for a long time. So Gage mentioned, like, when you have turnover, then you have to like restart with like your education process, and just been really blessed at Mount Vernon not to have much turnover, and the coaches that we do have are just so solid. So that makes it easier, right? Like, it's not that's not a hurdle for me. And so like education is so important. But when you have to restart the education process, that gets frustrating for sure.
Good topic. Good.
Miles, what
What do you have?
what were you gonna have for a question today?
Yeah, so you kind of touched on a couple things there, Preston, while you were talking about, you know, your athletic movements, right? Like the sprint, the jump, the throw, like the things that move the needle for you guys athletically, which kind of leads into where my head has been at a lot. We you know, another plug for the sponsor, we're just getting started with TeamBuildr here at Luther College, which is super exciting. And it's given me the one thing that I've really struggled with and have not done a good job of, and this is, you know, an excuse more than anything, like I needed to do a better job of it, but especially through COVID, turnover with assistants, I haven't had a ton of time to do a lot of data collection the way that I should. And we're finally going to have the opportunity to streamline that process and do a better job of it with TeamBuildr. So thinking about, right, you know, KPIs are like the key performance indicators, the things that you're measuring to make sure that you know that, you know, your program is working, right, that you are doing enough to get the adaptations and responses that you want. What are some of the, you know, the KPIs, the stuff that you guys track to let you know that your program is doing what you say you want it to do?
Yeah, I like that question. And I think it changes. Well, at least it has for me, especially in the last 6 months. I think it can change, you know, just as you develop as a coach and as your systems change and as your thought process behind training changes. You know, if you asked me this 5 years ago, it'd be bench press, squat, hang clean, vertical jump, probably. I don't know much else, maybe some type of sprint. There's still traits of that probably within what you know, your KPIs now, but, you know, it's like in my setting now, in the private sector, it's what's interesting is, you know, from an athlete standpoint, I'll talk athlete, is I'm not in control of all these kids' programming. Some of them, you know, like I got middle schoolers to where they don't train at school, you know, so all their training that's being done is with me. So maybe you could treat those kids as a more traditional KPI approach. So for them, with that age group, I like to do like a hand release push-up. We do a med ball throw for distance. We do a vertical jump. We do a triple broad jump for distance. And then we do a trap bar deadlift. Those are like the main ones. And it's a lot of kind of athletic, more like Preston talked about the athletic traits, you know, it's kind of more sprint, jump, throw focus compared to, but there is some strength patterns compared with the hand release push-up, the trap bar deadlift. With our high school athletes, for example, it's kind of the same thing. Like I don't have, it's trap bar deadlift, vertical jump, throws and everything, and maybe like a push press or a floor press compared to the hand release push-up. But the challenge for me right now is I'm not going to do back squat, clean, and bench press. I'm not going to test them out here training with me, because more than likely in most high schools, that's what most high school coaches have their kids do, because that's what kids have done, you know, since 1975. They're going to do bench, squat, and hang clean. So my challenge right now is just kind of filling in the gaps with some other things. But my thing on KPIs is it should support your training philosophy and your programming. And I talked about this with my company, Our Strong Performance. We had a barbell bourbon event. We talked just training a little bit. You know, from a programming standpoint, you know, you see coaches arguing did anybody see the Twitter argument over the Bills thing? The Bills don't back squat in season. So of course, all the coaches that are on that training, you know, are saying, look, see, we're right. You don't have to back squat in season. Okay. Well, then the Chiefs, I remember last year, Tyrann Mathieu, they obviously do squat in season. He set like a PR the week for a Super Bowl. So, which kind of fits my point here. It doesn't really matter what you do. That's my point. It doesn't really matter what you do in your programming, as long as you can coach it, Your kids can do it, and it's getting results at the right things. I don't think it really matters if you do a KPI on a single leg squat or a back squat, if it fits those three things. But don't make your hang clean a KPI. If you don't know how to coach a hang clean, the kids can't do it. Your hang clean shouldn't be a KPI for yours until it fits those markers, you know? So for me, those are the ones I've chose for my situation I'm in now. They were different when I was in the high school and college setting. They were probably your more traditional ones. We did bench press and squat. We did front squat, bench press, front squat. We did verticals every week. We did 10-yard sprints every week. That fit our space and our logistics. I would like to do a fly in and all that, but I just couldn't. So that's kind of where I'm at right now with that.
That's awesome. We have gone through a process of trying to figure out what was the best profile for us too. Not like it's a force velocity profile or anything like that, but just a generalized strength, speed, and power. And we separate them out. And we have 3 in each one of those categories. And what that allows us to do is we'll make standards for each one of those. And then based off of how they fit into that standards chart, it'll give them a score. And that score can help be a visual for them to be able to like see, oh, maybe I should focus a little bit more on strength, or maybe I need a little bit more work on speed, because they have that visual. So I'm super excited about that. And our kids, they like it too. So we have this, these are the main 9, and then we have a few other ones. So so it already sounds like a lot, but for our strength ones, split squat, trap bar deadlift, and bench press. So we have lower body, total body, and upper body. Then speed, we have fly 10, 10-yard dash, and pro agility. So we have max velocity, acceleration, and change of direction. And then for power, we have hang clean, vertical jump, and standing long jump. So a loaded vertical movement, unloaded body weight vertical movement, and then obviously horizontal with the standing long jump. And those are like the 3 that we'll use for each one of the categories. So strength, speed, and power. And then we also measure RSI thanks to Plyomat. Rich Burnett has an awesome product. Plug in that one for him because it's so cool. RSI, and our kids love that one too. It's another chance for them to basically play a video game. And then we do weighted pull-up. And then the couple that are going to be new to us this semester are 40-yard dash. We just got a rolled runway that we're super excited about. And then med ball throws, stealing that from, I think, Amanda and Gage. With med ball stuff. So I think it's just another cool way to measure power. So those won't go into the profiles, but they'll be able to track over a long periods of time, those things. And the reason why we have so many is because our kids love to see progress in different things. And I think it's a great way to stimulate, I don't know, just more buy-in, more time where they want to spend getting better. And I also think that what we do, if you look at our program, what we do supports this, and it gives them another opportunity to see like, okay, this is why we train what we train. And then hopefully it's you get the skill development from your sport coaches and be able to have that spill into being a better athlete, being able to play well in whatever sport that you're doing. So yeah, that's my overview on KPIs.
Yeah. Do you, Preston, if you've got your strength, your power, your speed stuff, and I know this might be a little in depth at the high school level, maybe not. But you mentioned like, okay, if we got a kid that's like really strong, but maybe a little bit slower, do you actually skew your programming for that kid to bias some more speed and velocity work? Or is it just kind of giving you an overview of where you're at, and you maybe make wholesale changes for the program entirely for everybody? Like, how individualized, I guess, are you getting that?
Yeah, so we always try to have a thread of everything within our programming already, plyometrics, speeds, all that type of stuff. What it really does, and I don't make any wholesale changes yet, because sometimes it just takes a little bit more time for some kids. But what we do is we just make them aware of maybe a deficiency. So I had a kid that he allowed me to use his profile. So we put it up on the TV screen and show people. And he was like a 12 in strength, and it's 12 out of 12 for the points that are available. His power, his speed was like an 11. So 11 out of 12. And then his power was like a 7 or 8. And so I was like, okay, this is a great visual. What's this person need to get better at? and everybody can see it and be like, well, he needs to focus a little bit more on power. I'm like, okay. And then these are the things that you can do to focus more on power. So now every time that they're doing any explosive med ball throw, any explosive jump, anything that's a loaded jump in the weight room, our band assisted jumps or hang clean stuff, our Olympic complexes, they can really be locked in. So did the programming change? Actually, no, it didn't. But now the intent behind their movement, because it's still in the program, all those things are already in the program. Now their intent behind it, I think, will be elevated. So I think awareness brings a whole nother level of stuff. So super simple answer. And in actuality, I don't really change much, but the intent behind things, I think, is what changes.
No, that's cool. I love that. Like you said, intent is kind of the name of the game. And I've found that with our athletes, like I can get really simple with percentages or RPEs or whatever that I'm doing with them. As long as their intent of movement is great, like you're going to get an adaptation with most kids. So I think just bringing awareness and helping them maybe lock in and focus a little more on their deficient areas is useful and pretty cool. So Amanda, how about you? What are you testing and tracking with your athletes?
Yeah, going back here in Preston makes me think, how as strength coaches, as working strength coaches, we have those like boxes we want to open and dive deep into, and then we put them away. It reminded me that I want to get working on that stuff. Mine is very simple. I think the number one feature of TeamBuildr that I love as a strength coach, with right now I have 460 athletes on there, attendance and consistency. I mean, we can track as much as we want, but I find myself as a coach focusing on who's not there too much. I mean, I've been telling myself for years, we got to focus on who's there. And it goes to show over and over and over again, all of a sudden somebody just brings it on when they are a late junior or a senior. And you go back, and the number one factor that's affected that, they've been there, and they've just quietly been there, and all of a sudden they just bring it on. So attendance is my favorite feature. Consistency is the number one KPI, I think, as a high school athlete we need to keep track of. And then number two, I'll go a different route. Wellness, checking in on their sleep. The TeamBuildr has a great questionnaire feature that can now you can set it up so if somebody puts in an answer that would be like, we'll just say sleep, for instance, and you put in 4 hours would be red. And if that student puts in that they were less than 4 hours, it'll send you an email saying, hey, this student was less than 4 hours. Now you got your wellness check-in. So it's very easy in the fall for me to, the football season, the sports season, it's the most amount of athletes. But once we start getting into where athletes go all different ways, all different sports, attendance, number one for me.
Oh, I think that's great. Again, simplicity wins a lot of times with this stuff. And the simple task of just showing up, 3 days a week for 52 weeks out of the year, right? And putting in that work over the course of 3-4 years can pay huge dividends. And you don't have to have spectacular performances in the weight room any one day, but if you just show up and put in consistently good work, especially at that age, right, they're gonna reap the benefits of it eventually. So yeah, that's awesome. That's another thing that we try to preach with our athletes a ton too, is the consistency piece. Is at the Division III level, there's at least a couple chunks of the year where we might not see our athletes for months at a time. December and January can be really hit or miss, and then the summers are really hit or miss. So trying to preach when our athletes are away from us, the consistency piece needs to be there if they want to make progress over the long term. And you can tell the kids that do, and you can tell the kids that don't pretty easily. So that's great.
This is why I love crew chats. So I talked about all these testing and all these things, and then Amanda comes back with, it all just comes down to how consistent you are with this stuff. And it's so true, So
it really is. And you know, as we get into remote training, Miles, and yeah, you don't have access to your kids in the summer. Again, that attendance is a great thing that you can be checking in with them, and they can be telling you if they're doing their workout. So wonderful. This has been fun. We have not done this enough.
We get back to it. So as we close up the show, be on the lookout. We will be we'll be kicking out some content with Amanda coming out in the following week, and then a couple of them are going to be back to back with Brandon Herring. He has a couple really good presentations. That one of them was an interview, and the next one he presented on speed work and what that looks like for his situation. And then Miles will close us out for kind of the month of February there. So appreciate these people, appreciate everybody on the Big Time Strength podcast making it what it is and making the Big Time where they're at. So appreciate you, crew.
Thank you. I hope you have a great week wherever you are coaching at this week.